You're all very welcome to the Dublin Book Festival. My name is Dil Wickremasinghe. I'm a journalist, director of Insight Matters, and I'm also a trainee psychotherapist. As I always joke, I'm married to a psychotherapist. I work with 80 psychotherapists. What am I going to be? A psychotherapist.
Psycho.
It gives me great pleasure to welcome to this interview Maeve Higgins.
I
wish I could do a drum roll. So I have to do my intro. Maeve, don't interrupt.
Okay, go ahead. I look forward to this.
You have done so much in your life. So I really want to honor all the amazing things that you've done. So
thank you.
Author of Maeve in America, which is the book that we're going to be talking about. Maeve is a contributing opinion writer with the New York Times, and her award-winning film Extraordinary came out in 2019. As a comedian, she has performed all over the world, including Ireland, Scotland, Australia, and Iraq. She's a prolific podcaster. She co-hosts Mothers of Intervention with Mary Robinson. Amazing.
And ever heard of her?
Yeah, exactly. And My Best Breakup, produced by Reese Witherspoon's media company, Hello Sunshine, and has appeared in Comedy Central's Inside Amy Schumer. And of course, her RTE show Fancy Whittles remains a cult favorite. Now, it's important to say that Maeve is from Cove, County Cork, up the Riddles. Her book Maeve in America was published this year by New Ireland in Ireland, and it really charts Maeve's life when she, at the age of 31, leaves home. And like many women in her early 30s, she both was and was not the adult she wanted to be. And Maeve in America is a story of how Maeve found herself literally and figuratively in New York City. Welcome, Maeve.
Oh my Thank you. I'm so glad to see you. Yeah, I really appreciate those kind words, and I'm very glad to see you, Dil. And I remember you from back in the early days of comedy in Dublin when we were just little baby stand-up comics, and look where we ended up.
Look at us with our millions and empty cribs and Rolls Royce and staff.
Exactly. Very, very, very wealthy, and horses and lots of skeletons in our closets, and
Now tell me, where are you joining us from exactly?
So now I live in Brooklyn. I actually came back to Ireland this year. I was in Ireland for a little while when the pandemic first struck. Do you remember when, I can't remember what date it was, but it was early March, and the Irish government said St. Patrick's Day was cancelled. And I was in New York and I heard that, and it was like a bat signal for Irish people to just come home. And I was kind of nervous being in America too, because I just didn't trust / do not trust the government here. So I left pretty early on in March, and I came back to Ireland, and then I just came back to the US. And I think I spent a few months at home and went back. And sadly, New York was the epicenter of the virus. I mean, it's everywhere now, but New York was very badly hit. So I felt really lucky I could come back to Ireland, where I think the virus has been handled actually really well. I mean, compared to America, everywhere has handled it really well. And it's it would almost be comical, wouldn't it? It would almost be like a farce if it wasn't so deadly, thousands of people dying every day. So, because it's kind of funny, some parts of it are you'd be like, is this real life? Is this actually, Rudy Giuliani farting and his hair melting and all this stuff is happening, but at the same time, people are unnecessarily getting killed by this virus. So it's just such a strange time.
Yeah. And how are you doing? And I feel I can ask you this question and actually get an honest answer, as opposed to people are going, grand, I'm fine. Or how are you doing? How is this year been for you, Maeve?
Grand. Yeah, I'm grand, thanks. Yeah, how are you?
Quick, deflect. Shift focus on the other person.
Oh, that's so funny. I know that's a quirk thing that we do. I mean, just answering a question with another question. It must be funny actually coming at it from like a psychotherapist point of view, because you actually, it's like it is your business to know how somebody is doing. But
Paying me. You're actually going to pay me. You're here for an hour and you're paying me. So surely you're going to be honest, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, if it's a transaction, maybe people cough up a bit faster. But honestly, I found that we've all gotten a lot better about talking about how we're doing, like specifically mentally. There's a lot more, it seems anyway, like in the ether about like, sharing, communicating, like checking in on each other. And like it can definitely be lonely when you're an immigrant, right? Because I came to America without any family. Or even I noticed at Thanksgiving, like I don't have that tradition. Like it's actually kind of a problematic tradition anyway. But you really notice that you're not from a place when it's around the holidays and when it's like time to like call in the family. You really notice it then. So I'm hoping to be back in Ireland for Christmas, because it's certainly lonely. I think everybody is experiencing like the isolation that comes with isolation, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, no. So because I want to get into the cultural aspect of things, because you moving over. I mean, it's so comical that he's the one migrant to another.
Yeah.
You're over there, and I came over here 20 years ago. So it's really interesting, because it's all shared. It's a very shared experience, irrespective of where you're originally from and where you end up. The process of moving from one country to the other, it doesn't matter. Everyone experiences the same thing. But let's start off by talking about immigration, right? Because I have a quote here from your book, which I want to share with everyone watching. Actually, by the way, if those watching, can you please put in the chat box where you're joining us from, because I love to get a flavor of where everyone is, and we can all live a little bit vicariously through where you are, because at this stage, anyone but here is very exotic.
It feels really glamorous, doesn't it? Yeah.
I mean,
even if you're like West Kerry, yeah.
You'd be like, yeah, sounds great. Yeah, just let us know where you're joining us from. So there's a quote from a fabulous book, Maeve in America. For most people around the world, America is a fortress, and visas to the US are, as a gym instructor once said when I tried to do a burpee, extremely challenging and likely not possible. So talk to me. How did you manage, first of all, to get yourself to the States, and do you experience guilt for making it there?
Yeah. So I think that burpee reference, like that exercise that I'm talking about, don't you? Where you jump up and then you do a press up, and then you, like, my chances of ever being able to achieve that are very, very, very slim. But I still think it's harder to get into America. And both of them, in my case, are getting harder. I mean, like, the past 4 years have seen America really tightening its restriction on immigration. The latest piece I wrote for the New York Times was about how there's this citizenship test, which I don't think exists in Ireland. You might be able to set me straight, but it's literally you sit down and you have to answer all these questions to an immigration officer about the history and the civics of America. Now, most Americans wouldn't pass it. There's a newly elected senator who got some of the questions mixed up. And so they're just making it hard in big ways and in small ways. But like, as you said, Dil, my path there was relatively easy. Like, I went over there first on a performer's visa to do like an Irish festival in Kansas City. And then I switched to an O1 visa, which is for aliens of extraordinary ability. And
aliens! Where are your antennas? How come you're not green?
You're seeing one right now. Can you believe it? Just looks just like you. Yeah, so that's actually what really started me down the road to questioning, because I started to look at like my life in Ireland was very pleasant, and I was able to work and have a lot of freedom and have opportunities. But I just felt like there was more freedom and more opportunities in the US. So I decided to move there, and I was able to. And then I realized, well, there's all these people who are stuck in refugee camps. There's all these children at the border of, the southern border with Mexico. And they really need to get into the US, like for survival in some cases. And they're not allowed in. So I wouldn't say guilt, because through the years, I've managed to kind of unlearn guilt. But what it did make me do was it definitely like invoked my curiosity and also made me take some action. So I just tried to learn more, and then I tried to advocate for other people who don't have the level of privilege that I do. But the guilt isn't quite the right word, which I'm glad of, because I think guilt is one of the most self-absorbed and most pointless. Is it an emotion, or it's like a feeling, or
and it can actually be devastating. Like,
really?
Yeah, it can be really, really toxic and can ruin people's life. Absolutely, because you
Yeah,
feel.
I was reading a thing in the newspaper earlier today, and it was like this elderly man, and he was writing about his grandmother and memories of his grandmother. And he was away for a weekend the day she died, and she was like in her 80s, and he said that guilt lived with me for the rest of my life. And I was kind of like, oh no, like, so that means you've been feeling guilty for 40 years about something that, I mean, I don't know if it was that big a deal anyway, but like, so
It was
whatever.
for him, obviously.
Maybe I've spent too much time in New York.
Yeah, because see, most Americans would probably be, the therapy is it's part of what people do, so they probably process it quickly and get rid of it, where, come on, this is Ireland. Guilt is almost a national sport.
Well, I guess a lot of us, were raised Catholic, so that's part of being Catholic. It's that you're born with sin, so you're always trying to catch up from that point. But I think unlearning that is helpful, right? And it's also like, I mean, it's obviously helpful for me because I don't feel guilty. I try and resist that. I try and work through it. But it's also helpful because, like, say in the case now where I realized, oh my God, because of my whiteness, because of my Europeanness, maybe because of my gender too, it was easier for me to get into America than it would be for like a young Iraqi man who lost all his family and who really needed to get there. But instead of just, oh, I feel bad, then I started to ask questions and take action and write and do bits and pieces. At least it makes me feel a bit more useful than just feeling bad.
Maeve, you're lovely. You're just so lovely.
Aren't I great?
So lovely. No, because you're just there. You talked about white privilege, and without saying white privilege, just talked about white privilege. So that's amazing. Thank you, because it's a topic that I don't think a lot of people realize the privileges that they have, without actually having to do anything. So it's just lovely to hear someone acknowledging that and doing something about it, using your voice, because chances are, because of your position of privilege, people will listen to you quicker than, say, the Iraqi guy, but by you saying that, you're just, raised awareness. So thank you.
No, I appreciate that. And I would say as well, it's not a platitude from me. It's like, I've researched this and I've read about it and I've listened to people who know and have lived experience. So I'm fairly confident and, like, I can back it up that I have white privilege. It's not like a buzzword or something. Like, it's very real. But I would say, in fairness, in Ireland, it's harder to recognize because white people are such the majority in Ireland. So often I think you don't understand, you don't feel racialized until you leave Ireland. This is speaking as a white Irish person. So it wasn't really until I got to the US that I was like, oh, like, it might be a social construct, but it's very real. Like, I'm white. When I'm here, I'm white. And that means that I'm more likely to get this job. It means that I'm less likely to get shot by a police officer. It's just more obvious when you're in the US, I think. But it certainly, of course, and sadly exists in Ireland too. And it's on us to, like, just understand that and do the reading. And if you're not sure what it means, like, you can literally just Google it, So it's not hard. Like, it's just not hard, you know. And as well, if you want to be doing what I'm doing, which is writing in newspapers and sharing my opinion and stuff, I have to be honest about where I stand. You know, I think that it's not really possible to be objective, but I think it's possible to be fair. And part of that is understanding your position in whatever society that you're commenting on.
Absolutely, and have truckloads of empathy, which you have. You know.
Empathy.
Yeah, exactly. So I just want to say there's a few people. People have are joining us from all over the world here. So
oh really? I can't. I'll just say to you, everybody, I can't see the chat. So Dil is like getting the info. So tell me, Dil, where is everyone?
You got Mary from Pittsburgh, Sharon from Dublin, Elaine originally from New York City, but now in Dublin. We got another Elaine who is in Westerly, Rhode Island, Rachel from Southwest France, Kay in Navan.
Navan.
In the middle of all of that.
Wait, I love the lady who like gave her address fully. She's like, I'm on Westerly Road, come in for a cup of tea if you want.
And then Saoirse? No, that's not that doesn't look like Saoirse. That's SCIRCE.
SCIRCE.
Circa? Okay. From an
cool name.
Yeah, from an empty theater in Dublin. Okay.
Oh, I know. She's a ghost. Oh my God, we've got a ghost tuned in.
And then Paula from Florence. Wow. Just look at Maeve. You pull an international crowd, I tell you. It's brilliant. Okay.
I'm global. I'm like Rihanna. I'm global.
Exactly like Rihanna. Exactly
like her. Yeah. People get me and Rihanna confused all the time, actually. It's really sad. It's your girl.
I'm gonna try and get through this interview.
Okay, sorry. No, go ahead. Yeah.
I'm trying to be all serious and journalistic. Right. So I want to ask you about the cultural differences, because you actually mentioned in your book around just moving to the States as an Irish person, and the two things really resonated with me. Making friends.
Oh my God.
Making friends. Like normally, as I think you pointed out, you know, if you're a junior infants or senior infant, that's when you kind of make friends and they stay with you for the rest of your life, you know?
Yeah.
Or suddenly you're in a new place and you have to make friends, and it's like dating. It's awful, isn't it?
Yeah.
How are you getting on?
I would say it's even a little bit harder, because like dating in the US is really straightforward. Like people are very upfront and you kind of know where you stand. But with friendships, you know, like you can't just say, actually, no, like, or you can't just say like, let's take this to the next level. So friendships, like, I think friends are a massive part of my life. And as you said, like, so I grew up in Cove, which is an island. So I went to play school and baby infants and senior infants with this, which also, by the way, is really funny to Americans. When you're Irish, you tell them that there's a class called baby infants and then also senior infants, as if you can be like a more senior infant, like you're like a business person and an infant. But when I had all those same friends, and I still have them in Ireland, but then I went to New York and I was kind of like, I felt like a little billy goat, kind of like butting up against people's heads, like, hi, like, I'm interesting, I'm fun, and they've no context for you. And that's exciting as well. Like you can kind of start over. And like Dil, you were saying, like when you moved here 20 years ago, or when you moved to Ireland 20 years ago, it was sort of like, I think the commonalities of the immigrant experience is that like we all leave one life behind and completely start a new life. Like no matter where you're from or where you're going, that's what you're doing. There's this break. And actually there's a lot of liberation in that. It's only then in times when, like, for example, a global pandemic, when you're all suddenly scattered, that it's kind of hard then, because you're like, oh shit, like how strong is my network, you know, and how can I kind of like, it's luckily now there's a vaccine, so I think I'll be able to see everyone again in a few months' time. But you know, that did you see that old film of Frankenstein, the old black and white film where like
Yeah.
There's a very famous scene where the monster, like, he finds it really hard to make friends because he's like weird and a monster. But
Like a
then,
ball sticking out of his neck.
yeah, he's not exactly like, you wouldn't exactly be like, oh, let's have a pint. You just be like, hi, can I get past you there? But there's this scene where he, like, finally someone is nice to him, like this little girl is nice to him because she's like a child and she doesn't see that he's a monster, and she's like giving him flowers and they're playing by a lake, and he gets so hyper that he's made a friend that he throws her into the lake. And I'm like, that's what I'm going to do to my friends after the pandemic. I'm going to be so excited to socialize that I'll be like, I'll go over the top and I'll accidentally kill them.
I keep getting that image of it was like a iconic image of a sailor, literally like I think it was in New York where he's like kissing this nurse, you know.
Oh yeah,
that iconic image. I have that iconic image when we can, like, hug and kiss. There's gonna be just mass, kisses and hugs everywhere. It's like, come here, mwah, I have to smooch.
Yeah. dipping them down like that. Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah, I can't wait. I can't wait. I think something that will come out of this is, I mean, nobody wants to hear like silver linings or whatever, but I'm like, okay, next year I'm really going to celebrate things and I'm not going to cancel things. And like, I get a bit of social anxiety. So sometimes at the last minute, I just can't bring myself to maybe go somewhere or do something. And it's like my kind of setting is like to isolate. So I always have to push myself to do more than that. Mm-hmm. So now I'm like, I will not cancel again. Like, I'll do it. Relationships are so important. And not just in a transactional way, like not just that they make me feel better, but they're just like, this year has definitely shown me that like they count for so much more than I'm even conscious of.
Yeah, no, because I've just handed in an assignment on existential isolation.
Oh, right, because you're in college, yeah.
Yeah, so I had to write 2,000 words on existential isolation, and it's like, this whole thing is like, we are. This is not meant to be depressing, but we come into this world alone and leave the world alone. So what you can control is what happens in between. You can, you can't, you won't be alone if you connect, and I think what this experience has it really brought, I suppose it really highlighted how much something like a simple thing like a cup of tea, or being able to have people over for a meal, which would be the next level. If you were,
that's like
friendship, but the other question I want to ask you around, I suppose, cultural differences, and again, coming from Ireland and moving over to the US, Ireland people don't really tell you too much about themselves. You kind of have to know them for years before you hear what happened with them and their family and whatnot. Where I believe in the US, they kind of tell you within the first 5 minutes, like, I had cancer last year. So you're like, oh, how did you handle that?
Yeah, I mean, that was a really big shock to me when I first got here. Is sort of like this openness, and how are you? It's like, well, I've got IBS actually. You know what? And I had dairy last night and it is not good. And I was like, oh, right, okay. Oh, sorry about that. Like, what are you supposed to say to that? They talk about their sex lives more openly, and, but still some things, like the longer I'm here, I'm like, oh, you're still not like, so, money is not really discussed here. And certainly politics have become explosive in the last couple of years, where it can really lead to breakdowns in relationships. Like, people can't rationally talk about politics, it seems like. So in the beginning, certainly I was like, wow, these like Americans are just they're open books, and they're so friendly, and they're so, and that is still true, actually. Like, they're really warm and friendly. Whereas I think in Ireland, we come across as really warm and friendly, but I don't know how actually warm and friendly we are.
Because I can answer that because for me it's yes, I love Ireland from the moment I got here, because I love how friendly, you can chit chat like a taxi driver. You will
Yeah.
never get into a taxi and not know, tell them your whole life story. They're like priests, you know? Because I
Yeah.
remember one time going to see my sister who was living in Cologne at the time in Germany, and I was in a 45 taxi ride, and for the whole 45 minutes, the taxi driver didn't say a word to me. I was convinced I had offended him because after living in
Yeah.
Ireland, I was like really anxious. Why is this man not talking to me? And all my attempts to kind of start conversation, he just didn't.
Oh my God. That's
Yeah,
so funny.
awkward.
Yeah.
But the problem in Ireland is, so people appear to be friendly, but to actually have deep friendships, it's really hard. Like, it's
Mm.
really, really hard for, because I think what you were saying, okay, my friend quota is filled. My junior infants, senior infants
Yeah.
friends are still with me now in my 30s now, and I don't have any spots. Sorry. I'll put an advert up in the local supermarket if I have a free slot.
Oh my God. Yeah, you're on the waiting list. So I'll let you know if Sharon really offends me. I'll be on to you. But have you found that having children has that like opened, or is there a different thing then? Mommy friends are maybe different again, are they?
I often think this is why I had kids to begin with.
Yeah.
I do sometimes. I have loads of friends now, and they're all from the school of our kids. And I wonder, did I have kids? Because I was trying to make friends so hard in Ireland, I just couldn't make them. But now that I have more friends than I could shake a stick at,
And you
then
could
they're
shake
all
a toddler at.
yeah, shake a toddler, exactly. Oh, it's so funny because I remember thinking if having kids, then that would then, because people make friendships because you were saying about transactions. You make friends as well so that they can maybe mind your kids sometimes, you mind their kids, and then you can have play dates and the kids can play together and then you can have some, conversation, adult conversation. That sounds kind of like X-rated adult, adults talking to each other.
I know what you mean.
You know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean. Yeah, I think that's a common thing, right? With my friends as well. It's like there's like the family, like the mom friends, and it's like a special code because it's such a tricky time as well. Like all my sisters, or a lot of my sisters have kids, and it's like learning a whole new rule book for how to live. So I think you do need each other as well, in those early years, especially.
It's just survival. You're literally just getting one day at a time, mate. One day at a
Yeah,
time.
you get in so much trouble if they don't live through.
Okay. Oh my God. Don't call child services. Don't go. They're fine. They're downstairs. They're locked up in the garage. No, they're not. My wife is looking after me. They're probably watching it. So hi to Phoenix and Xavier.
Oh no, really?
No,
Oh
no,
God.
no, because we've been walking around with your book, for the last whenever I can. I was reading a few pages here.
Oh, thank you.
Emery was dipping into it as well. So when I was telling them what I was doing today, I was like, that book that I was, and Cove.
Yeah.
I was telling them about Cove. My Phoenix is a big fan of the Titanic, so we had to go do the Titanic experience in Cove. So
Yeah, I mean, I love to talk to Americans about Cove actually, because Cove, it is where the Titanic last stop.
Last stop, yes.
And they, of course, they all know about that, but like in the film, it's not really specified. It's like Queenstown or whatever. So I'm like a one-woman tourist board for Cove because I think Cove is gorgeous and it's so historic. It's so pretty. And then the other thing, of course, is that it's huge emigration port. So like when we were in school, I remember over 2 million people left from Cove, like during the worst years, like in the 1800s. And I remember like kind of amateur historians coming to talk to us in school in Cove and like telling us all these like terrifying stories about coffin ships. So I think it must have sank into my brain. And that's why, I knew all about the people who left Ireland, but I just didn't know like what happened to them until I went to New York myself. And you might know that statue of Annie Moore, it's outside the Railway Museum. So I don't know if your smallies have seen it. It's like Annie Moore and her two brothers.
Yeah.
And they're standing on the quay in Cove. And then there's a corresponding statue in Ellis Island, because she was the first immigrant through the gates of Ellis Island when it opened in 1892. Oh. And so, I think about her a lot because technically she was an unaccompanied, undocumented minor. The three of them were. and they literally were welcomed in. They were, step on up, like picture taken, like you're the first immigrant. Again, she was young, white, female, European. At the time, Asians, well, Chinese, and later it went on to be every Asian, was banned from the US. So if she had been, just born in China, she would not have been allowed in. So there's a really long history of, discrimination in US immigration, and Annie Moore, who left from Cove, where I'm from, is like a classic example of that. And she's also, that thing that Irish people are so proud of, right? That she came from nothing. She was so poor. Her parents had gone on ahead trying to earn a bit of a living over there. So she was staying with her aunties here or in Ireland. Then she brought her brothers over, and then she didn't even travel. She stayed in New York her whole. She moved 2 miles from Ellis Island, and she lived there. She had 11 children. Only 2 of them made it to adulthood. Like, imagine losing 9 children. Like, and she was married to a German guy. And so anyway, I don't know. I do think there's something about being from a country that's so used to sending people that we have an interest then in migration. But it's been fascinating to watch, and also very dispiriting to watch, like how Ireland is handling particularly asylum seekers,
And
and
direct
like
provision now.
abolish direct provision. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's not hard to say that, is it? Like, literally, the European Court of Human Rights has said the system is completely off the wall, and Amnesty International hate it. And there's all these terrible cases of, terrible mental health emergencies and suicides in direct provision, let alone just like kids being born in there and not having any space and being able to cook. And so I'm sure
That's
people
actually why
watching.
that's actually why I set up Inside Matters 10 years ago, was because I heard of this woman called Oriomi who died by suicide. And she was an asylum seeker. She had 4 children, a husband. She received status. This is the thing that still haunts me to this day. She actually got that brown envelope with the harp that said, "You have the status to remain in Ireland." By that stage, she was already too damaged, and she took her life, and that
Wow.
was the reason why I set up. So these are real people. So what you're saying is it's not anecdotal, it's real.
Wow, I didn't know that that was so far back. That was 10 years ago, because I kind of was just tuning in the last few years. And it was funny because I was like, Maeve, why are you so like fascinated by, the US and what the US is doing wrong, when like on your own doorstep there was all of this? God. Yeah, well, I'm glad that, like, you know, I don't know, like, I'm glad that more people are aware now, but it's very slow, isn't it? Like, they keep saying, oh, we're going to end direct provision, it's going to go away next year, but then like, oh, but it takes a while. And it's like, these are like, a year is a really long time when you're 4, or even when you're like 30.
Absolutely.
So
But the fact that we're talking about this, and I said, when I was working as a journalist, I used to find I was one of the only few journalists who talked about it. Whereas
mm,
now it's like it's very much front and center. So
yeah.
it's going to happen, because now there's just people who wouldn't have known about it before now know it, and then obviously talk about it to their children, and it's become very much on the forefront of people's minds.
But you know what's so interesting, Dil, is like that you came here, right? And with your kind of outsider perspective, you sort of spotted that early on. Like, you were like, hang on, why are we putting asylum seekers in like holiday camps in the middle of nowhere, and like giving them like €4 a week and not letting them work? Like, you were like, this is a story. Whereas, you know, hundreds of Irish journalists, yes, some people copped to it, but most people didn't. And I would include like, I was living in Dublin, up until 10 years ago, and I never really thought about it, or I did much about it. So, Annie, what I'm saying is, that's another value I think that immigrants bring to a society. Not that I like rate people by what they add, but like, that is something that you actually can't get, really. That outsider perspective is actually so valuable. And like, that you were able to cover that story, and probably loads of others too. And I like to think that, like, when I go, to the US, I can kind of spot
That's
things
what
that,
you're
like,
doing. Yeah, you're doing
like,
exactly that. We provide a fresh perspective, because the thing is, when I came to Ireland 20 years ago, within the first 24 hours, and it sounds like it's made up, but it's an
yeah,
absolute gospel truth. Within 24 hours of me arriving in Dublin and my feet touching Irish soil, I found myself dancing in broad daylight down O'Connell Street singing "It's Raining Men," because my arrival in Dublin coincided with Dublin Gay Pride by pure and utter luck, right? So within the first 24 hours, I realized, wow, I'm safe. I'm surrounded by LGBTQ people. Look at my rainbow flags here. Just in case my haircut is not obvious enough that I'm a lesbian. I have two rainbow flags. But from that,
I think mentioning your wife as well was kind of a giveaway earlier.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, exactly. But the fact is, from the moment I got here, I realized that I could be myself, but also I became more vocal, and in Sri Lanka, which ranks one of the top 3 or top 5 most inhospitable countries in the world for journalists. So journalists in Sri Lanka will get killed if they criticize the government. So I realized in Ireland, not only you could speak out, but you could also be quite angry with the government and say, this is, you're not doing, this is not good enough, so there is a beauty about that in relation to Ireland. Yes, things are it is slow, but at least we can be open and give out reams when we want to against the Irish government, and I think that's something that I feel sometimes when you're an Irish journalist or an Irish person, you don't quite it's not as obvious for you, because you're worried. So I have a few questions for you from a wonderful audience. Your movie Extraordinary was brilliant, right? So will there be a sequel to it? And that's from me.
Yeah, thank you. So we're hoping to do something more with it, but the 2 directors, Mike and Enda, they're working on that. So hopefully, I don't have any news there yet, but it would be really fun to do more with that, definitely. Yeah.
I love the way how you liken the because you're trying to understand how film production, and the only way you could make sense of it was by likening it to a construction site.
Yeah.
Your dad's a builder.
Because it was my first film, my first time on a proper set, and it was really baffling. And like you see in film credits, the best boy and the grip and all this stuff, and I was like, what's everyone doing? And then I suddenly was like, oh my god, this is like one of my dad's building sites. Like he does building and restoration. And I was like, okay, the directors are like the architects. They're like dressed in like cool clothes and they always want a little bit more than is possible. And then like the first AD is kind of like my dad's job, like wrangling everyone and making sure the subcontractors are there and doing what they're supposed to be doing. And then like, it really made sense to me. But then I was like, so I am an actor. What does that make me? And it was sort of like a block, like concrete block, maybe some iron pilings. You're like one of the leads for the foundations. But it was very it was a real come down.
But you're keeping it real, Maeve. You're keeping it real, so so funny. The next other question from Quiva, and that is, which country had the best audience for doing stand-up?
Oh, well, so New Zealand was really wonderful, and I was so like, because it's from Ireland, it's the other side of the world. Like it's very hard to get further away, and I was having these amazing audiences. And then of course I went out one night and the audience were like leaving the theater, and they were all Irish. Like there was this, I remember there's like one big guy there and he was like, Maeve, girl, we're so proud of you. We're so proud of you, Maeve. I was like, are you actually from Cove? Like, are you my brother-in-law? So I don't know, like New Zealand / Ireland, I'd say.
Because stand-up is really hard, Maeve, because I gave it a go. I did it for about a couple of years, but then I was like, oh God, it's too hard. This is just too, I can't. So how are you finding? Because I know you, like the story in your book about the dolphins, you found yourself, trying to swim with the dolphins and then asking yourself, do I really want to swim with the dolphins?
Yeah, I was like, what am I doing here? Like, yeah, I mean, I think I don't really do that much stand-up anymore, Dil, and I think like you did the exact right thing by trying it out, and then I think stand-up is kind of like a strange, like lonely profession, and I think I appreciate it because it lets you it's really spontaneous. It's very lo-fi, like it's kind of democratic, even though it's very male dominated. But like generally speaking, you can find a spot for yourself and you can just say what you think into a mic straight to a crowd of people. No filters there, no gate, no gatekeepers. If you set up your own show and stuff. So but I don't really miss it, honestly. I don't know how good it is really for your central nervous system.
It's terrible for your nervous system. My wife is always talking to me about the nervous system and how we need to be more mindful of it. But yeah,
Oh, really?
it's like you're walking into, and it's like a firing squad. You don't know what you're gonna get.
Oh my God, one day. And also we should say to the audience, we've only got another 3 or 4 minutes. So don't worry. There's people probably wanting to have tea now and everything at this point. But yeah, once I did a show in Glasgow, which is like, the shows can go one of two ways, right? Because Glasgow is like a hard drinking, like really fun, like loud town. And you can just have the best show of your life where you're like on a high and it feels like you're surfing and it's like, hysteria in the room. Or it can just go really badly. And this was years ago, and I did a show and there was a load of British soldiers just back from Afghanistan and they were there to blow off steam. And they did not want to hear like, my thoughts on cat ownership or whatever the hell I was talking about at that time. And I will just, their faces, like it was bad. It was bad. I was lucky to get out of there.
Because they were like, lady, we've got real problems.
Yeah, it was like they probably just put their guns back. Like it was just not the right mix at all. Give me a Zoom conversation with you any day where there's like really nice ladies called Sive and Deirdre watching from Florence and Pittsburgh. Like, I'm happy.
So I want to ask you, what next? Are you working on anything now? Can you tell us anything? What's happening in your world?
Yeah, I mean, I'm writing another book actually, and so I'm contracted now with the New York Times, so I write for them, and I'm writing another book is my main big project, and then aside from that, I just am planning on different. Just what's taking up most of my time is online shopping for Lego for my nephew, and I never thought I'd be that person, but it's just like, there's all these like different Anakin Skywalker, different Star Wars things, and he's very particular. So that's most of my day. And then I try and fit in some writing.
Sounds good. Well, maybe in your next book, feel free to introduce a Sri Lankan Irish lesbian with an undercut. I really make a
maybe
great
maybe a little psychotherapist, little character who's keeping her beady eyes open, watching Ireland carefully while I'm away.
My beady eyes. I like it. Listen, thank you so much for joining me. It's been an absolute privilege to speak to you again after so many years. And I no doubt the audience really enjoyed this. I'm sure there's going to be a recording of this for those who missed it. And of course, your wonderful book, Maeve in America, is available to buy on the Dublin Book Festival website. A link will be put in the chat for those of you who haven't read it yet. And there are more events tomorrow as part of the festival, so check out our program. Maeve Higgins, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dil. I'm sending you and the family lots of love, and thanks to the Dublin Book Festival for having me, and to everybody for watching. It's so lovely. Yay! All right. Bye. Bye.